Bethany Israel, a married woman pregnant with her first child, she ended up having dinner with her brother and never came home again. What police say they discovered inside a house was so gruesome, so horrific, that it is difficult to imagine. Evidence pointed police straight to her brother Jack Ball, and for a moment, it looked like this case was headed toward a clear ending. But now, that ending is not so clear. We're going to break down the disturbing details and the latest legal twist with attorney Joe Richardson. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Now, real quick, there's something that we use here at Law&Crime that I think can actually be very useful to you, maybe add a layer of security to your life. So we partner with Truthfinder for the public record search services that we do here at Law&Crime. It saves us research time so we can focus on reporting crime and not the paperwork. But you can use Truthfinder too. Why? You type in a name, you can find addresses, you can find criminal history. There's a lot more. It's our go-to tool. It's our go-to tool for checks and one of the largest search services in the United States. And with a subscription, you can get unlimited confidential searches to check on new neighbors, vet people you meet online, maybe find somebody to reconnect with. You can even look up registered sex offenders in your area too, or even do a background search on yourself. But stay informed, stay safe, and check public records with Truthfinder now at truthfinder.com/LC Sidebar. Now, we tell a lot of stories on this show. Stories that end with a verdict, a sentence, a feeling that however horrific the crime was, the system finally turned a key, locked a door, we don't have to think about it again. It's over. But what happens when a guilty plea isn't the end? What happens when the door is maybe thought to have slammed shut, but instead it swings wide open into a whole new fight that adds a whole new layer of context and a whole new layer of uncertainty? That is what is happening right now concerning Bethany Israel, a 30-year-old teacher, coach, wife. She was expecting her first child, a son named Levi. In May of 2024, she went to her brother's house for a family dinner, and she never came home. So her mother, who was worried, went to check what was going on. And what she walked into was a literal slaughterhouse. What I'm about to get into is incredibly disturbing, okay? Fair warning. Police reports detail a bloody saw, a hatchet, and dismembered body parts. Later on in their search, investigators apparently found journals that led them right to their suspect, her own brother, Jack Ball, and also to a possible motive, because in those journals, police claim he wrote he was angry she was pregnant. And then you go to January 21st. This is after he's arrested, this is after he's charged, and Jack Ball stood in a Dakota County courtroom out in Minnesota and pleaded guilty to the premeditated first-degree murder of his sister Bethany and to the murder of her unborn child, so basically his nephew. Now, you would think that would be case closed, right? You would think that would be justice served, right? No. Because in that same moment that he pleaded guilty, his defense declared he's not criminally responsible. That despite his admission here, the law should not hold him legally accountable for these murders. So you have a guilty plea and a claim that he's not criminally responsible. How can both be true? What happens next? I'm going to get straight to the facts here. I'm going to start from the top. It's the evening of Thursday, May 23rd, 2024. Bethany Israel, who was about 4 months pregnant, heads over to her brother's house in Lakeville, Minnesota. According to the Dakota County Attorney's Office, she was going there for dinner. Now, hours pass. Her family can't get a hold of her. They are obviously worried. So at around 11 p.m., her mother drives over to Jack Ball's house, her son's house, right, to check on her daughter. And according to the criminal complaint, here's what happened next. The mom pulls up and sees Ball, quote, tear out of the house. She goes inside and immediately sees a large amount of blood. She calls 911. Police from the Lakeville Police Department, they respond. What they find inside, according to the reports that are detailed in the complaint, is horrific. In the kitchen, there is a large pool of blood. They find a bloody saw, hatchet, large bloody knives, and as they continue to move through the house, they see a knife on the living room floor near the staircase, and then they find several dismembered body parts. And while the scene is unfolding, police get another 911 call. This one's from a resident in Rosemount, that is a town a few miles away. This caller reports that someone was caught on the Ring doorbell camera placing what looked like a body part on the front step. Apparently, Ball was seen running away. Police seemingly find him. He's covered in blood. He's at a different location. Also has a potential self-inflicted wound to his neck. And then the filing says this, quote, upon searching the area, police found several dismembered body parts they believe to be those of victim 1. Yeah, it's bad. It's incriminating. He was arrested. He wasn't criminally responsible. Why? Because as the county attorney had said, Ball, quote, has asserted a defense of mental illness. And they are going to stand trial in late May of this year, 2026, where the state will litigate Ball's defense of mental illness. That's what we got to talk about. All right, so we're going to get to the why about that in just a minute, and I want to break down more of what we're seeing here. I want to bring on civil rights attorney Joe Richardson. Joe, thanks for taking the time to come back here on Sidebar.
Good to see you always, Jesse.
I got to say, I'm not surprised he pled guilty when you look at just the potential mountain of evidence. There's the scene. There's the idea of, witnessing him running away on the ring camera. He's found self-inflicted injury, bloody. Apparently, they search the area, find the sister's body parts. I don't even know what you would do as a defense attorney at a trial.
Pray. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I mean, and the letters that he wrote, and exactly, basically, there's a record that shows exactly why he did what he did between the film and the actual evidence that they found when they got there. They know what he did. They know how he did it. They can connect him to it. So from a defense standpoint, you would have to go to like a mentally ill defense. You'd have to. He presents a motive. He presents the what, the who, the where, the why, and the how, everything that you need for a case. So you'd have to go to a mental illness defense and hope to go down that road and have him considered differently than someone who really thought through on a first degree level, or maybe you go second degree because, he was indicted of each, both first degree and second degree. And theoretically, second degree might not bear as much in the way of punishment.
Talk to me about this, where he pleads guilty. It's not the end of the story, though. So here, right, under the state, you plead guilty, but then you can also simultaneously say, no, we need a trial to determine whether or not he's criminally responsible due to mental illness, right? So, and by the way, for people at home who don't know this, walk us through how that works. I mean, am I understanding it correctly?
Yeah, I mean, you can plead that you're guilty due to mental illness. And if you're successful related to that defense, then potentially you may have a civil commitment kind of situation and what you call a best case, or whether they call it, a lot of times you hear not guilty by reason of insanity, et cetera. And so in a particular circumstance, he may be civilly committed for a unprescribed period of time unless and until doctors feel like he is okay to be released. Now, in all disclosure, based on his agreement to plead guilty, I don't know that where it actually goes in terms of the punishment side. I don't know if he actually agreed to be imprisoned for life, but that in and of itself doesn't make sense because it's not a death penalty state, and the worst penalty he could have gotten anyway would be imprisonment for life. Now, it would have been mandatory under these circumstances. But
and to be clear, there is always a possibility that if somebody is determined to be mentally ill, not criminally responsible, they're committed to a mental health facility, they could be released. They could be released back into society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they absolutely could. And so if you are able to be successful going down that road, then you would be there as long as doctors felt like you needed to be there. And I'm certainly not a doctor. I'm a lawyer. And sometimes I question that decision. But in any event, what I'd say is
question your decision to become a lawyer or question whether you're actually a lawyer? Because
some of both. I've got the handwriting of a doctor. I'm told that all the time. So I said, well, maybe I don't know if I wanted to do med school or anything like that. But right. But this theoretically could go down the road where he is evaluated a certain way, evaluated over time, and that there's potential one day for release under certain circumstances. And theoretically speaking, a sentence where you don't definitely have to always be in jail, you're civilly committed as opposed to being in a prison, and with the potential for maybe daylight one day, maybe never, but maybe one day, would be certainly better than going and doing hard time for the rest of your life.
Now, when we're looking at Minnesota law, my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, if we're talking about somebody being not criminally responsible due to a mental illness, you have, this is this kind of insanity defense, right? So a mental illness made the person basically, they couldn't understand what they were doing, or they didn't know what they were doing was wrong at the time the offense was committed. It has to be at the time the offense was committed, okay? Not all the way in the past, not now, not how they're doing now. How they're doing now sometimes is a competency issue. how difficult is that in general? And as we go through this, I don't know. You know, there are aspects to this case. I mean, if I just told you the fact pattern, I say, listen, you got a guy accused of doing this to his sister. The motivation here, because she was, what, pregnant? That's the alleged motivation.
Pregnant and therefore not innocent.
Yeah. Tell me if there's something there. And I know it's a high bar, but tell me if there's something there.
It would seem to me to be very difficult. And so, again, going along that doctor path, is there a possibility that he is set off, a doctor may argue, because it was his sister, if he had a law-abiding past, et cetera, and this really truly came out of nowhere? Is there the idea that something was set off in him pertaining to his sister, pertaining to this related sense of honor, and that therefore there's no way this could happen with anyone else? Could a doctor do that? And or could a doctor also come out and render a decision 20 years from now, a determination 30 years from now, 40 years from now, that this person has been successfully treated from what he actually did? So it's not just a matter of, well, as long as it's not his sister getting pregnant, he's fine, but that there was something wrong here and it's been fixed. I think either of those are a tough sell under these circumstances because they're just so egregious and so terrible. And if he is pleading, what that means is whatever he's going to get for pleading is not as bad as what he could have gotten, but it's not as good as what he could have gotten if he went to trial and was successful with his mental illness defense. So it's somewhere in the middle in terms of what can happen. I'll also add quickly that sometimes you can go to trial in Minnesota and get a sentence of guilty, but be determined mentally ill and therefore actually get treatment while you're in prison. You're not civilly committed, but you actually get treatment while you're in prison.
Right, and that's different, obviously. Look, I will also say him allegedly running away, that would seem to show, you knew what you did was bad. Because look, there are crimes that I cover all the time where you would say, no one in their right mind could have done this. It's not the standard, right? I mean, I think we could look at, if I give you 100 cases of brutal murders and someone diagnosed them, and someone would say they suffer from this, they suffer from this. I mean, maybe you're right, they do suffer from mental illness, but it has to take that extra level. You had no idea what you were doing. You didn't even know what you were doing was legally right, legally wrong. And that's why it's a high bar, because everybody else would try to argue that and potentially not go to prison. So to really understand here what the defense is up against and what the prosecution is going to attack, I got to lay out the specific horrifying details that are laid out in the original criminal complaint. And this isn't just about the journals, because the complaint paints a scene of extreme methodical violence. I want to look at what police say they found inside the house. So the complaint states, quote, officers entered the residence and observed a large pool of blood on the kitchen floor, under the sink, and on the sink cabinets. Additionally, they observed a bloody saw, hatchet, and large bloody knives. As they continued moving through the house, they saw a knife on the living room floor near the staircase that led to the second level. In continuing their search, they located several dismembered body parts believed to be those of victim one. Now, Joe, I don't mean to be macabre, but if you're talking about a dismemberment like this, and you're talking specific tools, and maybe this took a period of time, and it wasn't just one instance, one action, would that tend to help a mental health defense, or would that tend to negate it? Because again, I do wonder if it did take some time, is it tough to argue you really didn't know what was going on? You really couldn't appreciate this? But on the other hand, if it's so grotesque and so unbelievable, I don't know. I wonder if that period of time, that period of action, multiple tools, you tell me.
I would think, now again, we're in a business where two people sit on sides of the table, opposite sides of the table. One argues the world is flat, the other one argues that it's round, and nobody gets sued for malpractice. So there's a way that each side would argue. My sense is that this would not tend toward helping him. All of this deliberation, all of this plan, and going back to go forward, we got these things. This is when she comes over for dinner. Did he invite her over for dinner, et cetera? Was this all part of the plan? To me, the more of this that goes on, the more method I see. You know, you got to be kind of special in a negative way to want to kill someone anyway. Okay, so it's like we're arguing, is someone crazy or not for killing someone? If you walked up to me, Jesse, and said, I'm going to kill somebody today, what's the first thing I'd say? I'd say, man, you're crazy. You can't do that. And so it's relative. The whole idea that the fact that someone isn't all there where they're crazy enough to kill someone, and not crazy in the medical or the psychological sense, but thoughtful enough to actually do something like this at all. The idea that they have done it so methodically, et cetera, is not going to automatically land them in a place where they say, oh, this person is clinically crazy and therefore they need to be civilly committed. No, this person was crazed. It ought to be first degree. It ought to be second degree, whatever the case may be. That's not going to absolve them. And these facts and details don't help them.
Mm-hmm. Now, the complaint also details what investigators say they found that speaks to the motive, which we've been talking about. And it's in allegedly his own handwriting. It states, in his writings, defendant wrote that he was angry victim one was pregnant and no longer innocent. Quote, no longer innocent. Joe, how does that affect the analysis?
I don't think that helps him at all, because most of the time when I'm a jury and I'm dealing with a case, I'm dealing with a murder, a lot of jurisdictions, you don't necessarily need a motive, but it helps. It puts things together. It puts the pieces in place. The idea that, of course, the defense is going to argue something else. And I would think that they would add some kind of triggering event even while they're there, right? At dinner, to create a second degree possibility or to create a mental illness possibility. But the idea that he's letting us know why he's going to do what he's going to do, just as much as the defense might think that it speaks to mental illness, I think that it speaks to plan and deliberation. And so therefore, he's going to have just as much of a problem because he laid out what he was going to do.
Right. And by the way, this is a battle of experts, right? You would have a defense expert, mental health expert, a prosecution mental health expert. Do they both examine him and they come with their own conclusions? And I guess a lot of people would also be wondering, how do you find somebody that would agree with your position? Because then it looks suspicious. What do you put an ad? Hey, we're looking to find this guy not guilty by reason of insanity. Anybody look at this? I mean, how do you find the expert that's going to, help your case?
Folks that are in this business will know both people that might be more defense or prosecution inclined, or understand their expert or their potential expert who may do both prosecution and defense. And it's good to be able to say your expert does prosecution and defense. It's even better to be able to say, if I'm the defense, to have somebody that normally does prosecution, or vice versa, right? Because it's almost like this is more off the beaten path for them to take an exception to their own rule. It is full and free and fair game for the defense to rail on the prosecution's expert and say, well, you do all prosecutions. You've done 20 cases with this attorney, haven't you? And vice versa, right? So you know who the folks are in the business. Sometimes on the civil side, in my world, we may talk to an expert just to take them out of the running to represent the other person as well. Mm-hmm. So you have a sense for where your phone calls start, even if you're not sure of where they end on who it is you end up arriving on.
Now I want to follow what happened next. So after the Ring camera call, police, they find Ball. He is apparently found in the backyard of a neighboring house. According to the complaint, he was, quote, covered in blood on his head, shirt, arms, legs, and pants. He had apparently a self-inflicted knife wound to his neck. But here's a key line for the mental state argument. So the complaint states that Ball was able to communicate with officers and accurately told them the date, time, and name of the current president. I find that interesting. So, Joe, how important is that? Could someone know all those details and still be mentally ill? Like they might know, yeah, today is Tuesday, president is Donald Trump, I work here, I'm 44 years old, whatever it is, and then say, yeah, but I saw an alien spacecraft coming down. I mean, how important is that to the analysis?
I would say that it is and it isn't important, right? I mean, if someone decided that, I'm going to play this game of mental illness, they could also say that they thought the president was Jimmy Carter. There's nothing that keeps them from saying that, right? So the fact that he said what he was clear about, can go both ways, just like everything else can. It certainly doesn't allow the defense to state, well, he didn't even know what day and time it was. He's in another space. He's in another universe. There's clear indications. For whatever reason, not only was, and this is the part that I think that I use if I'm the prosecution, not only was he clear about the days, the times, the place, kind of where he is, but he was okay with being clear about it. And so, therefore, here's a guy that he says, look, I'm just really mad. I'm really angry. It comes through in what he wrote, et cetera. And he had no second thoughts about letting them know that he was fully cognizant about what was going on. He understands his surroundings. He understands what day and time he's in, et cetera. So I don't think that that's something that helps the defense, even though they can still use it to say that doesn't mean that the person's not mentally ill. There are plenty of mentally ill people that know what day it is and know who president is.
What about the apparent self-inflicted injury?
Similar to a lot of other people that have killed other folks and then attempted to kill themselves afterward. It's still a two-sided coin to my mind. The prosecution is going to say, well, there's consciousness of guilt. He doesn't want to be here. He knows that there's no way out in regard to what it is that he's totally done. And maybe he's one of these guys that just says she has to suffer the ultimate sacrifice and for honor reason or whatever it is, like almost like an honor killing. And if I have to die too because I don't want to accept the consequences related to that, or because the police isn't going to understand, then so be it. The prosecution can use it to do that, and the defense can use it to say, well, that it's part of this larger story of mental illness, how one could potentially see this coming, particularly if it shows up in his past. And that's the part that we're not as clear about.
Putting aside the legality here, if this now advances to another trial, even though he's admitting guilt, what impact does this have on the family? From your perspective, what is the emotional cost for this next phase for a family who has already gone through so much with a case like this?
It's a double whammy because you've got one family member killing another. It's one thing, it's hard enough, and something separately that I dealt with, losing a family member violently, right? It's another thing when one family member has killed another family member, and I don't remember whether her parents are still around. They were at that time. So now the parent has the loss of a child physically, and for all intents and purposes, the loss of two children, because a life will never be the same for one or for the other, a potential grandchild, et cetera. So it's beyond grueling. I am certain that as a parent, it's something that you never get over. They might spend a whole lot of time second guessing themselves. How could this happen? Particularly if it's not like culturally related or things like that. There are some cultures where this type of thing happens, God forbid, et cetera. It came out of nowhere for the parents. This is not somebody getting hit by a car. This is one child killing and cutting up the other. And so you just don't get over it. What do you say? There are no words. How do you get past that? I mean, and you don't. And how do you keep living? I think it's very hard.
It is very hard. It is difficult to even imagine. It was difficult to even think about this headline when we decided to cover this story. Joe, we're going to talk a little bit more about the victim in this case. We're going to put an element to who she was in a minute. I'm just going to thank you right here. Thank you so much for taking the time to explain the legal aspect of it, as you always do. And despite what you may think about yourself, terrific lawyer. Yeah, so, thanks so much, Joe Richardson. Appreciate it.
I got a big case coming up next week. Listen, I'm going to show it to this judge if he'll look, and maybe we can hang in there. Thank you, Jesse.
Joe, appreciate it. Now, again, after a discussion like this, it is important, it is necessary to return to who was lost here in this case, in this tragedy. Bethany Israel, 30 years old. From her obituary and the words of those who loved her, they paint a clear portrait of how special this person was. She was a dedicated teacher, a passionate volleyball coach. Her family wrote that her presence on the court was, quote, nothing short of angelic, always smiling, encouraging her teammates, and striving for excellence. She met her husband, Josh, at an Apple Valley Volleyball Open gym. They eloped in Jamaica in 2021. They shared a love of traveling, for card games, for dancing. And as her obituary gently notes, quote, Bethany believed she wasn't particularly skilled at it. Now, they were expecting their first child, a son. I mentioned before, they named him Levi. Her family describes her as the embodiment of love. Quote, she never spoke negatively, always sought to help others, and wore a perpetual smile. Her light touched the kids she coached, the friends she played with, and even the newcomers she welcomed onto the court. In the wake of this unimaginable loss, a GoFundMe has been set up. Its description doesn't focus on the horror of what happened to her, but on the warmth of her life. It reads, Bethany was not only a cherished wife, daughter, sister, and an expectant mother, but also a beloved figure. Her radiant spirit and unwavering kindness touched the lives of all who had the privilege of knowing her. And it concludes, as a beacon of warmth and generosity, Bethany's absence leaves a void that cannot be filled. And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. We're also up on NBC's Peacock as well. If you want to follow me, check me out at X, Instagram, my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. Eastern. Until next time, stay safe, everybody.